have been asked, how do you start off in witchcraft? And it's a really good question. I'm sure it's quite daunting when you're really new to it. But I'd say that if you are drawn to the craft, if you have an interest, if you listen to podcasts, if you read books, if you watch videos of any kind to do with witchcraft, then I'd say you've already begun. But that's all very well and good, but what next? Well, the traditional starting point, according to many practitioners, and it certainly makes sense, is to start with the elements. The elements are the powers of our earth realm. So earth, air, fire, water. And they constitute the makeup of our planet as well as our earthly existence. So the physical as well as the spiritual elements of the planet. And also we are made of the elements too. We have all those elements within us. So it really makes sense to understand them, to begin to work with them, and to experience them magically, intentionally and viscerally, in a way that we don't necessarily in our day-to-day lives. I have some books here which I'll get to in a moment. Within the elements are creatures and beings called the elementals. And obviously I would advocate reading up on all of this, because what I'm giving here is just a very brief overview. But if you can read up on it, do. It does help. But of course, personal experience and gnosis, or UPG, is just as important, in fact probably more important. So the elementals, we have the ruler of earth is Gob, and the earth elementals are called gnomes. Then we have Nixa, who is the ruler of water, Undines. Then Peralda, who is ruler of air and the sylphs. And finally Jinn, who is the ruler of fire and the salamanders. And those are the elementals, the beings and the creatures who inhabit. They're made up of one single element. So elemental work is really the equivalent of laying firm foundations, one element at a time. So you'd spend a period of time, perhaps one lunation, with each element, and traditionally people start with earth. The Ciceros, they say contact with a specific elemental force produces a magnetic attraction whereby the corresponding elemental energy is awakened in the psyche. So back to where to begin with the with your practice. One idea is to do a rite with Archangel Sandalphon, because Sandalphon is the spiritual ruler of all the elementals, so all the elements. So perhaps a very simple rite to ask for her blessing and guidance as you begin. So just a candle, a white candle, incense if you wish or if you have it, and a heartfelt request using your own words, and then a little moment of silence, contemplation, going within, perhaps listening would be a great way to begin. But if you don't fancy that, of course you can just plough straight in and choose an element to begin to work with. But try to do something every day to connect you to whatever element you're working with at the time. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It could be something very simple like collecting an item which represents that element and adding it to a little pop-up altar. So we have here Earth, Air, Fire and Water, Scott Cunningham. He's a Wiccan writer, but this is a great introduction and some good exercises and rites that you can begin with. So that's a great one. This is absolutely super, one of my favourite books ever, David Conway, An Occult Primer. This isn't witchcraft, but obviously witchcraft and magic are very intertwined, and this has some really good information, so I really recommend that one. And of course the Mastering Witchcraft, which I do have a little chat about. There's a video on my channel talking about this book. So it's an unusual one. It may not be quite, I don't know. Anyway, it's a classic. What can I say? So going back to Scott Cunningham here, and there is a rite for Earth described in there, which is a great way to begin. I'll just leave that there. You can pause for a little focus. There we go. So that's a great way to start off. There's so much to say really about you know, how you can begin and the things that you can do. There are many ways, and please don't think what I've offered here is the only way. There are so many, and you can pick your own way out. This is just a suggestion. There's just one more thing that I would add, that if you are beginning, do keep notes. Again, take it or leave it. You may not want to do that, and that's absolutely fine. But I have found it very useful. I think you might find it useful looking back and to be able to look up things. You know, I think it's so important, and also it kind of solidifies your practice. So you're doing these practices, and by writing it down, it kind of cements it somehow and takes it more deeply into your consciousness. So that's another reason. You don't have to have a, you know, all singing, all dancing, fancy pants book of shadows. You can have that if you want to, but don't be daunted by that. If you just want to keep rough notes or an audio file or open a document in Word, all of that is totally okay. Whatever you do is you know, as long as it's right for you, that's fine, and don't let anybody tell you any different. There are another couple of points I'd like to mention just before I sign off, is whatever you do, whatever effort you make is never wasted. No practice along the way is ever wasted. And also, you're tapping into a stream, an ancient stream of, should we call it consciousness perhaps, that was shared by our ancestors, by the past witches and magicians and cunning folk. And that's a really powerful thing.